Mini episode 1395 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge Mini Episode 1395. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here with two of my favorite FDH Lounge dignitaries. Always love to get on with them. When it's these two guys together, 99.9 times out of 100, we're going to be talking baseball, and indeed, that's what we're doing today. We are previewing the 2021 World Series, which will be between the Houston Astros and the Atlanta Braves. And a pleasure, as always, to get both of these guys on. Two of my longtime friends here doing the show with me. The gentleman I've known slightly longer, back to when I was a sidekick of his back in the day. Life's a Pitch with Ken Detwiler on the late lamented Sports Talk Network. And he's been by my side ever since. A dignitary before there really were dignitaries here, before there was the lounge. My close personal friend, Ken Detwiler. How you doing, Kenny D?
Hey, good. Good to be with two of my best baseball buddies.
Absolutely.
This is going to be fun yet again.
Oh, yeah. Love breaking it down with you and with, as I go to set this one up here, another close personal friend and longtime FDH Lounge dignitary and among many, many other things, sports editor of WestchesterCountyPost.com. Of course, one half of the great combo on Kallas Remarks, the great podcast with our pal, Joe Stazak. My good friend, Steve Kallas. Steve, good to have you back on. Also, my friend, welcome to the program.
Great to be on with both of you as always. Looking forward to this.
Going to be really cool getting to do this here. I'm going to start, as I generally do with something like this, some of the oddities of this year's World Series. I always like to look for any kind of historical patterns between the two cities involved or anything like this. The one oddity that really comes to mind is this is the first time these teams have met in the World Series, but it is their sixth playoff meeting. You might say they're doing a reverse Cardinals-Brewers, because the Cardinals and Brewers first met in the 1982 World Series, and then when the Brewers jumped leagues and were division mates for many years with the Cardinals, they met again in the 2011 National League Championship Series. These teams met repeatedly in the National League playoffs. 1997, 99, 2001, won by Atlanta. 04 and 05, won by the Astros. The 04 victory was actually the first playoff victory for a series in Houston history. So beating Atlanta was big at that time, not as big as winning a World Series, but it was the franchise breakthrough. Meanwhile, in 99, the Braves beat the Astros to make the World Series. And imagine saying at that time to an Atlanta Braves fan, you won't be back in the World Series until you're playing the Astros in the World Series. The Astros were, of course, many years still away from joining the American League, making this possible. Both managers over age 65, Brian Snitker and Dusty Baker, in there. And for Dusty Baker, this is very interesting little fact here, debuted for Atlanta against Houston on September 7th, 1968, again when they were both in the National League. And this is a series very, very unusual here, factoid, courtesy of Wikipedia. The first ever series with two teams from the former Confederate states, which I don't know if we got Stacey Abrams' permission slip signed for this series, much less they yanked the All-Star game out of Atlanta this year, and now the World Series is coming there. So it seems very insensitive to people who didn't want big events in Atlanta to bring the World Series there, but what are you going to do? That's how MLB booked it, right? And this is the first time that both LCS losers from a previous year have rebounded to make the World Series. Both of these teams came up a round short of the World Series a year ago, and here they are now. And it's the first World Series since 2014 that does not have a number one seed from either league. So, thoughts on any of those weird little factoids? I'll start with you, Steve Kallas.
Well, I think this is weird for a lot of reasons. My first complaint would be the American League Pennant Series, or the League Championship Series now, was the multiple cheaters on Houston versus Alex Cora on Boston. Believe it or not, I was actually rooting for the Red Sox because this still stinks to high heaven, the fact that these guys, I think they should have been, you know how they bar college teams sometimes, like 3 years from playing in the NCAA tournament?
Right.
I think they should have barred the Astros
Okay.
and the Red Sox.
Okay.
Although I guess they didn't prove as much on the Red Sox, but Cora was like one of the key components for both of them. And of course, they gave the Astros immunity. That's why they were all admitted cheaters, which is kind of incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's just me. But again, the notion the Astros win here and they're going to prove something is, to me, preposterous. They won one World Series. They clearly cheated during that World Series and before that World Series. So I'm going to be rooting hard for Atlanta just for that reason. But there's a few other interesting things. And I just want to say up front, I know we're essentially all old-timers here, but I am so fed up with the postseason home run stats. And in the old days of 2, 3, 5 years ago, they used to say, well, you know, in the old days before '69, they only played World Series, and so they only had one postseason series. They didn't have, 24 games or whatever it could be. I guess it could be 7, 14, 5, 19 in the wild. I guess it could be 20 games. The most you could have was 7 in the good old days of pre-'69. And I can even live with divisions because at least you had to win something, i.e. a division. So when the Mets swept the Braves in 1969, that was as big a miracle as beating the Orioles. But whatever, I digress. I just want to give some numbers so we can have it somewhere on the record. And the all-time postseason home run leaders are Manny Ramirez with 29. Then Bernie Williams, home run hitter Bernie Williams with 22. Home run hitter Jose Altuve with 21. And home run hitter Derek Jeter with 20. Okay? But I just want to give you their World Series home runs before I get to Mantle and Ruth. Manny Ramirez, and we all agree, a great home run hitter. He has 4 World Series home runs. Bernie Williams has 5. Jose Altuve has 2. And Derek Jeter has 3. World Series home runs, Mantle 18, Ruth 15, Berra 12, Duke Snyder 11. And I might mention that Ruth had 15 home runs in 167 at-bats. And it took Mantle, I love Mantle, but it took Mantle 273 to hit 18. My point on all of this is, yes, you can say the Yankees played in a ton of World Series. And yes, you can say the Yankees would have won less World Series had they played in a multi-series world. But the notion that these guys, Bernie Williams, Altuve, Derek Jeter, are like home run hitters postseason, give me a break. So I think there should always be 2 lists. I mean, I'm a guy who thinks they should have 154-game record still and 162-game record still in baseball. And I think in football they should go to 12 games, 14, 15, 16, 17, because especially for football, from 12 to 16 is a totally different season. I know we're not talking football here. But one final thing I want to say, most hits in the single postseason, and Eddie Rosario, who was unconscious, had 14 hits in the NLCS. 4 other guys have had 14 hits. Mario Scudero, Kevin Youkilis, Matsui, Albert Pujols at least. And I will point out, because I find it interesting to me, as you go along, you face better pitching. Nobody in the history of baseball has ever had 14 hits in the World Series. So I'll say it again. A home run in the first round against the Texas Rangers by Bernie Williams in the late 90s or the mid-90s doesn't count as a World Series home run and almost shouldn't count as a postseason home runs because the guys you get early just aren't that good. The pitches aren't that good. I'm sorry.
Well, very interesting points. Ken, any thoughts on that or on any of the historical nuggets that I helpfully served up?
Well, I was hoping for the Boston Braves against
Nice.
against the Atlanta Braves.
Yes.
I have to But one thing I'll say about Cora, compared to those appleheads that are going to be playing for the Astros, is simply this. Cora at least admitted it, that he was wrong, explained that to his family, as I saw on one of the interviews at the end of the game, one of the games. I'm still hearing crickets from, it's deniability from the Astros. They didn't do anything wrong. I mean, come on. Unless I missed something, but I'm with Steve on this. This is ridiculous. The cheaters go, and that's probably the way the world's going now in a lot of instances. They just get away with stuff, and nobody holds them accountable. Accountability, folks. You cheat, you should have to have a price to pay. And at least Cora came correct and was thankful that he had another opportunity. That's the only little nugget I'll give him.
Okay. The only counterpoint I would make to that, Ken, is that it's Dusty Baker who's managing the Astros, and he didn't have anything to do with this now. And you'll like this. I'm throwing this in for your benefit. Dusty Baker initially going, an old school guy like Dusty Baker initially going to a team that's analytics heavy like the Astros. You would have thought that would have created more awkwardness than any scene with Cousin Greg from Succession. But here we are. He's done pretty well in 2 years.
Cousin Greg. Hey, I resemble that remark back in the day. He's like 6'5".
Yes. Love Cousin Greg.
But yeah, that's just the bone I was going to chew, and that's why Steve and I and you get along so well. We can chew on these bones, and we're old enough to remember when the game was played properly. We do. And it's just, and I agree. There are 162 games. I mean, I'm seeing football now, 17 game schedule. It's just, I'm a fossil. Well, I want to make a point about 162 games and where I think that leaving aside how records should be gauged historically, how I think the 162 game season is a very misleading framework for looking at this World Series here, because on paper, Houston is fairly decent favorites here, and in our FDH Lounge Power Rankings, which we have up on the main page link at fantasydrafthelp.com, going through, it is true that in every category that we were looking at, Houston did have the advantage, except the two teams were tied in FIP, but Houston with advantages in our power rankings, OBP, OPS+, ERA+, Pythagorean record, SRS, and run differential. Now, that said, Atlanta wasn't like heinous in any of these ones here, but it's just that Houston was very much near the top in all of them. But that's over the course of 162 games. And I'm going to start with you on this one here, Steve, because again, you guys know how fond I am of cross-sports references here. This Braves team, in a lot of ways, reminds me, because I'm such a huge believer, and a lot, FDH Lounge Dignitary Ben Chu and I have had many legendary off-air debates about regression to the mean, progression to the mean, but they remind me of the 2019 St. Louis Blues. I don't know if the Braves wandered into a bar and somebody put $20 worth of Gloria in there and that turned around their season. I don't know if it worked the same way for them, but this is a team that was 30-35 on June 16th, and they were way too good of a team to be 30-35. Now, I know that they lost Marcell Ozuna because of his off-field issues. Ronald Acuna Jr. would go down a couple weeks later, blowing out his knee. They made some great trades at the trade deadline, including the aforementioned Eddie Rosario. But from that 30-35, they finished 58-38. So while they're 88-73, and the Braves, that's their record, the Astros are 95-67. To me, Steve Kallas, the 58-38 number looms above all of this. The momentum that they have, that they came in with, finishing strong. And Houston didn't exactly finish weak, but they were 25-21 in their last 46 games. So they were a little bit less than what they were during the season, but Houston was pretty steady throughout the course of the year. That number at the end of 25-21, a little bit below their winning percentage for the year, because they opened at 70-46. But I still just think, in looking at this, Steve, that if we're not taking into account the the Braves team that finished the season here and what they were towards the end, and we're just conceptualizing it for the season as a whole, I think that's a mistake.
Well, you're 100% right. I think the season really started for the Braves, who Ozuna wasn't playing. He had a monster year. I think it was 2 years ago and was good last year. But Acuna is one of the five or seven best players in baseball. When he went down July 10th, I wrote him off for sure. And then they went 44 and 28. I know your numbers are a little bigger, but since Acuna got hurt, they were 44 and 28. That's pretty good. But I thought the season totally turned around, although I certainly didn't notice at the time. I noticed they picked up some nice players, but I never thought they'd be this good, including Eddie Rosario. But they also picked up Adam Duvall and Jorge Soler, who, by the way, only had 2 at-bats in the championship series. He's back now. The question is, will he start game 1? But Duvall and Soler as Braves, I know Duvall, I think he led the league in RBIs or whatever, but as Braves, in 2 months, August and September, they combined for 30 home runs and 78 RBIs. The day of the trade deadline they had, and I'm not sure, you would know better than me, Rick, how these possible percentages to make the playoffs, they put it up every week in the NFL. Well, on July 30th, the Braves' chances of winning the National League pennant were 2%.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget, a couple of weeks before that, they traded for Jock Peterson, who wound up with 3 home runs so far in the postseason. So they really did turn their season around. Maybe they thought it might go this well. I didn't. But, they turned their season around with those 4 guys. And since Peterson arrived on July 15th, Atlanta had a 285 average with runners in scoring position, and that was number 1 in the major leagues from July 15th till the end of the year. So a lot of things changed. On the one hand, I'll say to both of you guys, 88 wins in the old days, 88 wins. Well, you had a nice season. See if you can do any better next year. But in this world, and we've talked about not just expansion to divisions, the dreaded wild card. I used to write columns on how baseball was the best sport by far because you had to win something, originally the pennant, and then even with 2 divisions, you had to win your division. Once they went wild card, to me, baseball became like everybody else. And they're just trying to find more ways to get more people into the playoffs. You have the absurdity in the NBA now of the 7, 8, 9, 10 play-in tournament or whatever the hell they want to call it. It's just ridiculous. The NFL, if you're at 500, if we can just win those last 3 games and make the playoffs, it drives me nuts. And it happens in baseball. This is a bad example, but 88 wins, you're right, Rick. They're not an 88-win team at all. If you go on second-half records, they're as good or better than most teams in the playoffs. And I'll just go briefly back to the Dodgers series, because I did want to say Chris Taylor hit 3 home runs in 1 World Series game. I don't know the stats, but he was one of a very few people, I'm guessing, who had a chance for a 4th home run. And I love Chris Taylor, and he's a free agent. He's a very good player. Now he's, gone to a higher level. But boy, did he try and hit a home run his last at bat, which he probably never tried in his whole career. And it kind of showed. But I do want to point out, getting again back to postseason versus World Series, Chris Taylor became the 11th player to hit 3 home runs in a postseason game. It's happened 12 times. And, of course, the only guy to do it twice is Babe Ruth. But the only guys to do it in a World Series game are Babe Ruth twice, Reggie Jackson, and Albert Pujols. And I'll say it again. That, to me, shows the difference between the World Series and everything else. So, again, I don't want to beat that to a pulp, but it certainly means a lot to me. So I think the Braves turned their season around specifically at the trade deadline. They got Peterson a couple of weeks before, but then Rosario, Duvall, and Soler, who, again, had 2 plate appearances. He got hit the other night, and then there's talk, is he going to start? He played really well for us, and we'll see how that shakes out tomorrow. Finally, I just want to say now, I don't know how in-depth if we're going to go on each team or not, but I want to talk briefly about the lefty relievers on the Braves, because these guys just came of age, and I think it was also, Rick, the midseason to the playoffs and how these guys have grown. They trot out these 3 lefties who can get out righties, Minter, Tyler Matzik, and Will Smith, their closer, and here's why the Dodgers lost. The Dodgers, against those 3 lefties, went 4 for 52, 22 strikeouts, and those three guys had a combined .077 ERA. In the entire postseason, they've allowed 2 runs in 24 and 2/3 innings. They have 35 strikeouts, have given up no home runs, and 9 hits in the 24 and 2/3 innings. I know we're going to talk about more, but that to me turned out to be the key against the Dodgers, and I think could very well be the key against the Astros in the World Series. Matzik, a lefty, came in and struck out, and this is in the final game, struck out Pujols, Sousa, and Mookie Betts back to back to essentially give them, that was with second and third, nobody out. That was the turning point of the game. And I think what these guys have done, being pretty unnoticed, although good during the year, has been almost unfathomable. Those are video game numbers. And I know we're going to talk about more, but that to me was the key to them winning the past series. It might be the key to them winning the World Series.
Well, again, a couple points here, and I do want to ask you a follow-up on one of these things here, Steve. And by the way, I'm going to point out that while I had predicted when we did our playoff preview, I predicted the Dodgers to win the pennant. Before the League Championship Series on Twitter, I hedged my bets, and I picked Astros and Braves. Because when the Dodgers were coming off of that grueling series against the Giants, and the Astros had, the Braves had it a little bit easier against the Brewers, that's where I flipped my decision on that. And I do think that played into the last series somewhat. At the very least, the very slow start that the Dodgers got off to. But knowing you as I do, Steve, I knew you were going to reference Atlanta only having the 88 games and many years that wouldn't be good enough to make it in and whatever. I mean, I knew that was coming. But the thing I'm going to say is this, is that the general manager / president of baseball operations, whatever his titles are, Alex Anthopoulos, he's had kind of a fitful journey from when he was the young would-be savant in baseball to getting to this point now. But he did, in my estimation, and I think you would agree with me, the only rational thing you could do in loading up, because, as you pointed out, it is a tournament now, much like March Madness. That's the way it is. And the Braves, they were a consensus pick to make the playoffs at the beginning of the year. A lot of people like myself at the beginning of the year had them going out in the National League Championship Series. They have one of the best rosters in baseball. So even with injuries, and yes, with Ozuna and Acuna Jr. out, those are 2 MVP candidates. But if ever there was a roster deep enough to withstand this, it would be the Atlanta Braves. So Anthopoulos making those moves and saying, we're definitely going to have a much better second half than a first half, whether or not I make these moves. These moves can maybe take us over the top in October. He looked at it exactly rationally in my estimation, and I would guess in your estimation, Steve.
Oh, 100%. I love it when it reads too well. You know that, Rick.
Exactly.
Further based on that, since you made an excellent analogy to it's now a tournament, I have to say, to have in the quarterfinals of the tournament, 106-win team play 107-win team. Boy, that's kind of rough to see. And now they're both gone. Again, in the old days, if you won 100 games and you were in the World Series, even if you lost, you had a really good year. Now, the Seattle Mariners, in, when was that, 98, win 100, or whatever year it was, won 116 games, and the Yankees knock them out, and they're like forgotten. I can't even tell what year it was. So I understand the money part of it. I understand we have to make as many teams possible get to the playoffs. I understand we have to have a bottom run, the NBA, so the 8th seed can get their heads kicked in by the 1st seed. In the NHL, at least you have a chance. But from a big picture, and as Ken says, we've all seen this for many years, it's really kind of sad now versus then. Just in terms of, the Giants won the Super Bowl with a 9-7 record. I'm sorry. And I'm a Giants fan. Football Giants I'm talking about now, of course. And you just look back to the old days, and if you go way back in football, you'll see a team was like 13-2 and didn't get into the championship game because somebody else was 14-1 or something. I mean, I understand 106 and 107 is absurd, but you had, at least on paper, the 2 best teams in the tournament during the regular season. One got knocked out in the quarterfinals, and one got knocked out in the semifinals. And I'll say it forever, because you can't beat this. This is kind of the way it is. But yeah, you're right. It's now a tournament. It's not the old days. And I could even live with the division series at the beginning because you had to win something. And then it was 2 rounds. But now all these rounds are like compiler rounds. I'll say it again. You can play 7, 14, 19. You can play 20 games in the playoffs now. And to me, that's kind of ridiculous. But to compare those records, that's why I think the World Series record should be out front kind of this week, because that's real baseball. And I think you'll see better pitching. A couple things I want to say quickly about pitching, because I want to hear what Ken has to say. But I read this, and I just thought it was a misprint. But the relief pitchers in these 2 series, relievers for the Braves pitched 49% of the innings. So we're now at the 50-50 level, starters and relievers. The Astros relievers pitched 57% of postseason innings for the Astros. And when I read this, Ken, I was thinking of you because I thought it was a misprint, but I checked it in 2 different places. In the first 4 games of the ALCS, the Astros starters pitched 6 2/3 innings. And I remember thinking, damn, I don't think they all pitched 6 2/3 innings. Ken, the starters for the Astros in the first 4 games pitched a combined 6 2/3 innings in 4 games. And I still thought it was a misprint. And I'm like, we're already here. Everything we thought about 2, 3, 4 years ago has now come to pass. And those numbers on relievers, I think, are only going to go up. You don't need 5 starters. You need 3 starters and 2 openers now. It's really ridiculous, but this is where we are. Analytics has kind of messed it up. And sometimes you'll even tell me most times it works. I'll put in my final thing for the bunts. So they say it's 2% better to have like a guy swinging rather than sacrifice bunts. They worked it out over years. I say now that's not true. I say now that's not true anymore, because every week on SportsCenter, if you watch, you'll see 1 or 2 games that are decided. A guy lays down a sacrifice, the pitcher throws it into right field, or the third baseman throws it into right field. Why? Because it's not automatic like it used to be in the old days. Nobody bunts, nobody fields, nobody throws. Pitchers don't throw from the third baseline to first. They don't even practice that anymore. So I'm a big bunt believer. And I think these guys should bunt for hits. I don't even think they should give themselves up. But that's a whole other show. Maybe we can do next spring.
Wait, well, big bunt wasn't Big Bunt Believer a big hit for the Monkees back in the '60s? Or am I remembering that wrong? But the one thing I will say, as far as the pitching formula for Houston, that's how you survive losing a Lance McCullers. I mean, say what you will, but they advanced, they got through, they did what they had to do on that. And yes, Ken, I definitely want to hear your thoughts on the pitching things that Steve was kind of serving up there.
Well, and you guys know the stats a lot better than I do. I watch the game, I love the game, just like both of you do. But I'm nowhere near the stats that you guys present, and that's what gets me going. I'm sitting here taking my notes, listening to both you birds chirp about this stuff. But how far off am I by saying that the Dodgers, their pitchers only went like 2 innings each game?
Right.
Am I off base on that or not?
I mean, it seemed like it anyways. It seemed that way.
I mean, people just came in and they went out, and Scherzer was in, and then he was gone. And through no fault of his own. But I'm sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, these guys that can't even go 2 innings, or something along those lines. You know, the starters came in and out so quickly. To Steve's point, and to yours too, Rick, it's amazing. They just go to the pen, and I didn't realize it's like 50%, but that doesn't surprise me at all either. Before you go to the pen, and the starters do get in 50% of the time. With what Steve had said, he stole my thunder on some of my points on the Braves. So, but of course, you guys are on top of things. So, I have the fact that the Braves bullpen is going to be probably dominant here.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have any chance at all of winning this.
Right.
And who knows if that was a mirage with the lefties coming in. Being an old lefty, I pulling for them at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
But I did see the Braves, and this is kind of going sideways on us here a little bit. I think they beat the Dodgers because they could hit the long ball better.
Yes. That's absolutely true. I mean, and that infield, and I'll tell you what, Ken, I'm going to do a little cheap pat on the back for myself here. Austin Riley, who, as you know, wears the uniform of the Innovators of Violence in our long-term keeper league. Austin Riley, given the Braves in the postseason, what he gave me all year long, and what he's given me since he got called up there. But you are right about the power being the differential, and that again, when the Dodgers started losing guys like Muncy and having some of the guys cool off that were hot in the San Francisco series, you are absolutely right about that, Ken. They didn't have the margin for error power-wise.
No, they just couldn't. They couldn't keep up with it, and maybe if they had Trevor Bauer for the whole season.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's funny how he's been erased from history. I mean, that's a name you don't even hear anymore, and yet, again, that's a huge variable to have been taken out of that series. So there's no question that things might have been different for them if they'd had access to him. But yes, this Braves infield, the power hitting infield all the way around. I used to joke about the old infields with the Phillies back in the 2000s here, that you could put Rick Morris at third base and still have the best infield in baseball. But between the way that at the corners, Freeman and Riley, and then Albies and Swanson in the middle, the progression that Swanson's made. Again, once they tuned up that outfield, they were really in good shape. The pitching being strong, even without Soroka, and that's another thing here too. We don't really talk about him anymore, but he hasn't been in there for the Braves due to injuries. So there's some really great talents that are going to be sitting out of this postseason. I will say that Bill Simmons' Ewing theory here of that sometimes a team is better off without anybody. I don't think anybody in their right mind is ever going to make Ronald Acuna Jr. a Ewing theory candidate, and they're doing it despite his absence, clearly. But it's been an incredible run for them. For the Astros, you got McCullers out. That leaves the rotation kind of compromised. Their bullpen is not as deep as Atlanta's, which I think has a chance to really be problematic for them as far as being able to chew up innings and go deep into games. Obviously, the power that they bring is very, very much the same between the emergence of the one-time great prospect Kyle Tucker really kind of coming into his own here, and Correa and Bregman, what they still give you, the veterans from the last great run of champions here in Houston. So I'll start with you, Steve, because I'm just going to say I'm leaning towards Atlanta off the bat here because of some of the variables that I've been talking about and some of the things they have going for them versus I think the McCullers thing has a chance to be very, very huge for a team whose rotation can't necessarily afford it.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I'm leaning towards Atlanta, but even if you came in and made an incredibly convincing case for the Astros, I wouldn't pick them on just general principle. And by the way, are you sure I speak for Ken? Next year, Rick, when you're going to go on somewhere and give a new pick before the LCSs, I think Ken and I should be notified so we can make our picks as well. Because now you come out smelling like a rose. You picked the World Series. I'm still looking for the Tampa Bay Rays. I can't find them.
Would it be arrogant? Would it be terribly arrogant of me if I said I just assumed the entire world was looking at the FDH Lounge Twitter picks?
Yes. Well, all my fault for not going there. I do think, and I know starting pitching is becoming less and less important, but in my mind, it's still important. You're right. Without McCullers, they're going to start Framber Valdez. Now, Valdez, he had the best starting pitching performance in the playoffs. He held the Red Sox to 1 run in 8 innings in Game 5. And then Garcia came out in 5 2/3 in Game 6 against the Red Sox. He gave up 1 hit, no runs in 5 2/3. So these guys who don't have the names, they have a right to be there. It'll be interesting how they deal with these kinds of appearances in gigantic games. I know Valdez is starting Game 1, but to have an old vet like Charlie Morton, who of course former Astro Charlie Morton, to have him and Fried, who has the best curveball in baseball. I'm sure you've watched it, Ken, because this guy has a huge lefty curveball. It's like an old-time curveball, 12-6. I think they have starting pitching, and I think you're right, Rick, in saying I think they have the edge in the bullpen. Although some things I've read that said Houston, Presley's a great closer, but Houston's lefties are not very good. I don't know what they're going to do with Freddie Freeman and Rosario. I mean, again, Rosario splits. He's the MVP. 560 batting average, 607 OBP, 1.040 slugging. That's the video game. His
Right.
OPS is 1.674. I've never heard of it except in a video game. And also Alvarez, give him credit. We didn't even mention him for Houston. 522 batting average, 538 OBP. Okay, he doesn't walk much. 870 slugging for a 1.408. Again, and I'll mention Gurriel, batting champion Gurriel at the age of 37 in this series, 455. 520 OBP, 636 slugging, 1.156 OPS. So the Astros do have two of those guys, and the Braves only have one. But Freddie Freeman, last year's MVP, who struck out 7 of his first 8 at-bats in this series, came back to have a really good series. And I just don't think that the lefty relievers, and I think this is important nowadays, it's almost like we should talk about the relievers more than the starters. I don't think Houston's relievers are going to come in and be able to get out Rosario and Freddie Freeman. Obviously, we'll see, because that's when they'll be brought in, presumably. But they don't come remotely close to Houston's 3 lefties. Now, to Atlanta's 3 lefties. Now, Luke Jackson had a terrible series. He's their righty middle reliever and has had a really good year. But, he threw that high fastball to Bellinger for strike 2. I remember Ron Darling saying Bellinger had a terrible season, but a really good series. I remember Ron Darling, of all people, who's great, he said, yeah, we've seen this year Bellinger has trouble a lot with the high fastball. And the next fastball is 3 inches higher out of the strike zone. And, of course, Bellinger hit it for that 3-run homer, which at least seemed to change the series. It didn't when they won the game, but it didn't change the series.
Right.
But I think that might be the key. Atlanta's 3 lefties in relief versus the 2 lefties for Houston. I don't know if that's too narrow or not, but I think it's very important. And the 2 lefties are Freddie Freeman and Rosario. I mean, come on. Those guys can hit lefties as well.
Well, I think those are very good points. 2 things I want to mention before I throw it to Ken here, and that is on the Atlanta pitching. And that Charlie Morton, you said formerly of the Astros. Let's note this as well, formerly of the Rays. This guy, every October, he's pitching deep into October. This guy, so it's not just luck. It's not just that he's, lucky to wind up on good teams, but he's contributing to these teams being very good. But Charlie Morton has been the biggest common denominator probably of the last 5 World Series, and it's just an incredible, he's having a great renaissance. He's age 37 and he's getting the job done. Meanwhile, Max Fried, on a far less mature point than this, I do want to reference the great Hulu sitcom Letterkenny when they were talking about using different baseball cliches as pickup lines. What you said about his 12-6 curveball, probably the greatest adaptation I've ever heard is, your 12-6 curve is making me go 6-12. So try that out on the bar sometime, kids. Try it out. And on that note, Ken, I don't know where you go with that, but your thoughts on the series.
Well, let me start off by, and Rick, you could feel this pain too, because Eddie frickin' Rosario.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, come on.
Well,
but just let him go.
Well, and here's the thing, though. In fairness, once he got to Atlanta, he didn't have Ty Van Cornholio as his batting coach, so there is that.
True.
Yes.
But a couple things. Okay, I'm just going to go down my little litany here quickly, and I won't bore you to tears. But first of all, if I'm pulling for Atlanta too. And one of the reasons is because I'm a history buff and I believe in this great country, but states' rights, baby. Take the All-Star game and shove it, because Atlanta said, but this is how we're going to run our state, and this is how we're going to do it, whether you agree or disagree. But it's at least they'll get they can recoup some of the money they lost from the All-Star game.
Well, Ken,
that should have been there.
You say that now, but how pissed are you going to be if they move the 3 National League games to Denver?
Yeah, that's true too. Oh, but again, I'm going to go back to pitching again. Surprise, surprise. And and you guys have both good points in there. I believe Atlanta has the better pitching. I don't know how the Astros are going to, handle this lineup from Atlanta. And simply because I don't think they have the relievers, I don't think they have the starting pitching to match up with them.
True.
As far as Morton, Fried, Anderson. And I'm going to try out another one. I'm going to dust him off here. Smiley could be, a dark horse here too.
Yes, very possibly.
But the thing that flips me over a little bit on the Astros is, they're going to get 4 games at home, maybe, and that means they're going to trot out the DH, which again. I don't believe in, but they should have it equal, whatever they're doing on this, as far as a fair playing field. The Astros also, as I watched them during the series, the previous series, was that they work a pitcher.
Right.
They foul balls off left and right. All of a sudden, the pitch counts up. They've had productive outs. They've moved runners around. It's just, it's a good brand of baseball to watch, not if you're a pitcher. So I'm curious to see how Atlanta's going to handle that, because these guys are just good hitters. They'll put the ball in play. They'll foul it off. They'll get their pitch then eventually. And so I don't know the number of pitches these guys are fouled off or do any of that stuff, or how that'll even play out. But the home games, the working the counts, and I think, and maybe this is just me, maybe it's because of the way the American League's built, but I think they're just tougher as far as hitting. Just what I just said previously.
Yeah.
All those things add up. And those guys, the National League plays the kind of ball that I used to love.
Right.
Move the runners around, like Steve said, bunt them over. That's a lost art.
Right.
That's a lost art at all levels now, high school, college, all that stuff. So, I think that's about everything I said. I think the Astros are going to be up the creek a little bit with their pitching, and the Braves, I think, are going to take advantage of that.
I think very possibly. Now, with the DH, further insult to injury for us Tribe fans, we're going to get to see old Abe Almonte making a couple of appearances here.
No.
Probably not, but you never know. And as far as it goes with Smiley, I do agree with you. We shouldn't sleep on him. The biggest thing to him is he is, especially relative to the rest of the rotation, more of a pitch-to-contact kind of a guy. That 137 whip, mildly fugly here. So, if he can kind of keep that under control, then the Braves are going to be in very good shape. But something tells me he wouldn't be going deep into games anyways, probably. So let's just throw it around here to get picks and any other thoughts on this. I think most of the thoughts on the series have already drained from my head, so I'm just going to say I picked the Braves in 6. I'll throw it to you, Steve.
Yeah, I got a few things to say about what Ken said that kind of supports what he said. The Astros have the lowest strikeout rate in Major League Baseball. And that strikes me, just as Ken said. You see more pitches, you draw more walks, you put the ball in play. What a concept. And they did score 67 runs in the 10 playoff games already, so that's 6.7 runs a game. Obviously, that's pretty good. And 45 of them came with 2 outs. So that all, Ken is right. The Astros have a bunch of hitters. Their infield, Bregman, Correa, Altuve, Yuri Gurriel, batting champ this year, whatever I think of them, that's an unbelievable infield. So I'm going Braves in 6. You stole my thunder, Rick, but I think they can do it. I do want to mention, before I throw it over for Ken's pick, though, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the manager, 72-year-old Dusty Baker. Now, poor Dusty Baker, I'll say, because he lost the World Series as the Giants manager in 2002 to the Angels, which forever stays in my head because you guys probably both know that the Angels were the first wild card team to win the World Series, and that just made me sick. But imagine having that happen to you, and then the next year you're managing the Cubs in the Bartman game.
Right.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, so that's back-to-back years. And that's the closest he's come to winning a World Series. Now, everybody's saying Dusty Baker will become a Hall of Fame manager if the Astros win, and I'm not saying he won't. I mean, you can make the case for him now. He's 12th all-time in regular season wins. And the 11 guys in front of him all have won a World Series. And all are in the Hall of Fame except Bruce Bochy, who I think will eventually, he won 3 with the Giants.
Yes, he'll make
it. My goodness, he even won a pennant with the Padres. So I don't know if this makes Dusty Baker a Hall of Famer or not. If he wins, he's definitely in. If he loses, I think you can still make a case for him. But you guys are right. I do give him credit. He was not there for the bad stuff. They brought him in as kind of the grandpa. But I also give him credit for pulling Ian Anderson for a pinch hitter in the 4th inning of that last game. And the guy got a pinch hit single. I forget who it was. But then Rosario hit that 3-run homer. And that essentially made them winners. So
Yeah.
I think I'm not saying he's Mr. Analytics, but he kind of gets the point. And, I think the Astros, besides cheating, have been a pretty good analytics team as well. And, of course, Snitker, I like him a lot. Interesting note, I don't know if you guys know this, I just found this out today. Snitker's son, Troy Snitker, is an assistant hitting coach for the Astros.
Whoa.
So somebody in the Snitker home is going home with the guy even said, the son, I guess maybe he lives at home. I don't know. He said, well, one of us is bringing the World Series home. But his dad is a 66-year-old lifer. You love those guys, Ken. I love them. I'm sure you do too, Rick. Been in the Braves organization for over 40 years. Was actually hired by Hank Aaron, who was working for the Braves for many years, in the late 70s. So you got to love this guy because he's a real lifer. And you saw the happiness. This is what a lifer looks like when he finally makes the World Series. And until the last few years, nobody's ever heard of him. So I love those two managers. Yes, they're old-timers, so there is room in the game for old-timers. And I just wanted to mention them. But I, like you, Rick, have Atlanta in 6. How about you, Ken?
Well, wait a minute. Quick thought before we throw it to Ken. I just want to mention here, I can't let this go by, what you were talking about the cheapening of a wild card team winning the 2002 World Series. I'm just going to postulate here for a second. A little more cheapening by the fact that Dusty Baker had Big Head Barry anchoring his lineup at the time and all that implies. So, I think that was a little bit worse for baseball's reputation than a wild card team winning the World Series. So I'll part company respectfully. And Ken?
No, you're 100% right on that.
All right. Ken, going to throw it to you. Other thoughts on this and your World Series pick?
Well, I'm going to ask you both to think about this as I ramble on for a minute or two here. Who is your World Series hero in 7 games?
I'll
let you think about that right now.
Call me a homer. I'm going to say Austin Riley. I'm a homer.
All right. Steve? You can wait a minute or so. I have mine.
Yeah, I think I'll listen to what you say, and then I'll have somebody by the end. I'm not going to say Rosario, because that would be an obvious pick. But these guys, it's hard to hit, 562 series in a row.
My pick is another dark horse. Surprise, but Solar, who's who I'm thinking. Yeah,
dark horse.
He's probably going to DH a few games. His bat's going to get in there somehow. So I know that's a long shot, but I think the only way Houston even wins this thing, and anybody out there that's going to be listening to this, please go the other way than what I've just told you. But Houston has to hit the ball on the ground and keep it on the ground.
Yeah.
Because not Houston, they're going to have to keep the Braves hitting the ball on the ground. Because what I said earlier, they hit the long ball. They love to hit the long ball, and it puts them ahead early in the game. And as we saw with the Dodgers series. So I'm picking the Braves barely in 7. And like I said, that's my pick. And the other thing, too, is I'm so tired of hearing about, and I've been saying this, too, about how unfairly the Astros have been treated, and they have something to play for, and, they were so unjustifiably treated. They're cheaters. Let's call it what they are. So they can go piss up the road. Pardon my language. You might have to delete that.
We don't delete
That's
anything.
all I ask.
No. Well,
Oh,
interesting thing here is that we're all picking essentially Atlanta to finish off the series and win in Houston. It is worth saying they're the freakish kind of a team that has a slightly better road record, 46-35 as opposed to 42-38 at home. So if ever you're looking at a team that would be more likely to win it on the road, however marginally it would be, Atlanta. Steve Kallas, thoughts on a World Series MVP before we wrap?
Yeah, I'm going to go Freddie Freeman. I think he slumped badly the first two games against the Dodgers, 7 strikeouts and 8 at-bats. Then he totally turned it around. It's been around forever. His first World Series, MVP of the league last year. I don't think he wants to leave. He's also a free agent. I don't think he wants to leave, but I think given what the two lefty relievers are, now Valdez is the lefty, the starting pitcher, but given what the two lefty relievers are, I don't think late in the game Freddie Freeman is going to walk up to the plate and be really, really worried because he's either going to hit two lefties who can't sniff his 3 lefties in the bullpen for Atlanta, and everybody else is righty. I think, don't get me wrong, Presley is a great closer, but I think Freddie Freeman's going to have a very big World Series, so that would be my pick.
Very, very interesting indeed, and we'll have to see how this plays out. Always a pleasure to have both of you guys on the show here. Thank you both so much. Ken Detwiler, Steve Kallas, for being on with me here today to break down the World Series.
Great as always, Rick and Ken.
yeah, great job, guys. I mean, I love the fountain of information you guys keep throwing at me. I'm just sitting here just watching it, you know.
Or misinformation, as I've been accused of from time to time, but yes, even that can be, I'm using the old Gorilla Monsoon line. I'm a fountain of misinformation. Yes, exactly. So, regular information, misinformation, it's all good. Thank you guys both, and thank you everybody for tuning in to our World Series preview for 2021, FDH Lounge, mini episode 1395.